Welcome to Adding Mixed Numbers with Unlike Denominators. Let's do a quick review so that you can be really sure of these skills. So the first problem is 4 2/3 plus 2 2/5. So when we're trying to add fractions together, we always need to ask ourselves, do I have the same denominator for both fractions? And here we can see we don't. One has thirds and one has fifths. So we know we're going to have to find common denominators. So our first step is to take this whole problem here and we're going to write it vertically. So we're just going to write 4 2/3 plus 2 2/5. All right, my addition line there. So the first step is just to take the whole thing and put it vertically like we would do normal addition. Then we can look at our fractions here and convert them into the same denominator so that I can add them. So when I see 3 and 5, I'm going to look at the smaller number here and I'm going to ask myself, if I've got 3, is there a way to make fifths using 3? Like, could I multiply 3 by a whole number to get to 5? Well, there is no number I could multiply 3 by because 5 isn't a multiple of 3. So I'm just going to use the strategy of multiplying them together. So that would be like multiplying, oops, there we go, these by 5 over 5, which would give me the new fraction of 10/15. And then down here, I'm just going to use the strategy of multiplying that by thirds. Since I'm borrowing the thirds here, it comes from my thirds there. And when I did fifths here, that came from the fifths here. It's just opposites. So let's get those highlighters out of our way. So we have 2 times 3 equals 6, and 5 times 3 is 15. So I took my old 2/3 and I turned it into 10/15. And I took my 2/5 and I turned that into 6/15. Draw that better. There we go. Now that I've got fractions with common denominators, I can go ahead and add them easily. 10/15 plus 6/15 is 16/15. And then don't forget to come back here and add your whole numbers. 4 plus 2 is 6. So now I've got 6 and 16/15. So before we can call it done, you've got to stop and ask yourself, when I look at my fraction here, do I have a proper fraction or do I have an improper fraction? Meaning, is my numerator bigger than my denominator? Well, I know that 16 is bigger than 15, so I've got a whole number hiding in there. So if I'm going to think about, and I'll do my thinking space over here, if I'm going to think about 16 over 15, that would be the same as 15/15 plus one more 15. So 15/15 I can draw my 1 box around. It's like a 1. So really 16/15 is the same thing as 1 and 1/15, which means if this is worth 1 and 1/15, I can add 6 plus 1 and I'm going to get 7 and 1/15. All right, so there's our strategy. We found common denominators, then we added up our two fractions. So let's go ahead and do that same exact strategy for our next problem. So our next problem has 2 5/8 plus 1 3/4. Remember, our first strategy was just to write it vertically. So we have 2 5/8 plus 1 3/4. And then draw our equal sign line. So our first, after we've written it vertically, our next step is to look at our fractions here and ask ourselves, do they have a common denominator? Well, my first one is eighths, and my second one is fourths. So I don't have a common denominator. So I can ask myself, looking at the 4, is there a way to turn 4 into 8? Can I multiply 4 by some whole number to get 8? Well, we know that 4 times 2 would be 8. So I can do my 3/4 and I can multiply it by 2 over 2. So that would give me 3 times 2 is 6, 4 times 2 is 8. So I was able to turn that into eighths. My 5/8 is already an eighth, so I don't need to change it. It stays 5/8. So I can cross out what I've changed. And now I can just go ahead and add across. 5/8 plus 6/8, 5 plus 6 is 11. That's 11/8. Come back and add my whole numbers. 2 plus 1 is 3. So we have 3 and 11/8. So then we can ask ourselves that same question, look at your fraction and say, do I have a proper fraction where my numerator is smaller than my denominator, or do I have an improper fraction? My numerator is bigger than my denominator. Well, 11 is bigger than 8, so I know that that's an improper fraction. So think about 11/8, and I'll use my thinking space over here. old fractional way. And let's make it a different color so it's easy to see. Let's think about this, right? If I have 11 eighths, that would be like 8 eighths plus, so we can count up from 8, 8, 9, 10, 11, plus 3 eighths. So my 8 eighths is my 1, so 11 eighths is the same as 1 and 3 eighths. So then I can come over here and say, this is the same as 1 and 3 eighths. So I'm going to add 3 plus 1, here I'll write it up over here, is 4 and 3 eighths. All right, so I hope this helped you figure out how to solve these. Better get to work.